The morning sun cast long shadows across the cobblestones of Windsor Castle as Thomas Whitmore adjusted his red ceremonial uniform one final time. He had served the crown for 23 years, standing guard through countless royal ceremonies, state visits, and moments of national importance. Never in his distinguished career had he imagined he would face what was about to unfold on this seemingly ordinary Tuesday morning. King Charles III had returned from his private morning walk through the castle gardens, his face bearing an expression Thomas had rarely seen before. The monarch's usual composed demeanor was replaced by something far more troubling, a mixture of anger, disappointment, and what appeared to be genuine hurt. Palace staff whispered among themselves as they watched their sovereign stride purposefully through the corridors, his footsteps echoing with unusual force against the ancient stone floors. The previous evening had brought devastating news to Buckingham Palace. Intelligence services had uncovered what they believed to be evidence of a plot against the crown, information so sensitive that only the highest-ranking officials were privy to the details. The investigation had been ongoing for months, involving surveillance, intercepted communications, and careful analysis of suspicious activities that seemed to center around someone with unprecedented access to royal security protocols. Thomas had noticed the increased tension among his fellow guards over the past few weeks. Extra security measures had been quietly implemented. Rotation schedules had been altered without explanation, and senior officers had conducted unusual briefings behind closed doors. The atmosphere within the palace walls had grown thick with unspoken concerns, though none of the guards had been informed about the true nature of the threat they were meant to be protecting against. What made this situation particularly shocking was the identity of the person at the center of the investigation. Captain James Morrison, a decorated military officer who had served as the king's personal bodyguard for over 15 years, had somehow become the primary suspect in what appeared to be a conspiracy that reached the very heart of the monarchy. Morrison was not just any guard. He was a man who had literally taken bullets meant for members of the royal family during overseas visits. Someone who had been trusted with the most intimate details of royal security arrangements. The evidence seemed overwhelming at first glance. Morrison's personal communications had allegedly revealed contact with individuals known to have anti-monarchy sentiments. Financial records showed unexplained deposits into accounts linked to his name. Most damning of all, security footage appeared to show him in locations where he should not have been, during times when he was supposed to be off duty, apparently conducting surveillance of royal family members' private activities. King Charles had spent sleepless nights reviewing the evidence presented by his security advisors and intelligence officials. The betrayal cut deeper than any political scandal or public criticism he had faced during his long journey to the throne. Morrison had been more than a bodyguard. He had been a confidant, someone who knew the family's most private moments, their fears, their vulnerabilities, and their daily routines. The thought that this trusted protector might have been planning something sinister was almost too painful to contemplate. The decision to order Morrison's arrest had not come easily. Charles had demanded to review every piece of evidence multiple times, bringing in independent experts to verify the authenticity of the communications and financial records. He had consulted with senior advisors, security chiefs, and even reached out to Morrison's former commanding officers to understand how such a seemingly loyal servant could have turned against the crown. Every avenue of investigation seemed to point toward the same inevitable conclusion. Palace protocol dictated that such a serious security breach required immediate action. Morrison could not be allowed to continue his duties while under suspicion, regardless of his years of faithful service. The arrest would need to be handled with absolute discretion to prevent panic among the other staff and to avoid creating a media sensation that could damage the monarchy's reputation. Plans were made for Morrison to be quietly detained during his next scheduled shift, with minimal disruption to normal palace operations. Thomas had been selected to assist with the arrest, partly because of his own impeccable service record, and partly because his presence might help maintain some sense of normalcy during what would undoubtedly be a traumatic moment for everyone involved. He understood the gravity of the situation and the importance of handling it with both firmness and dignity. Morrison had been a colleague and friend to many of the guards, and his arrest would send shockwaves through the entire security apparatus. As Thomas prepared for what promised to be one of the most difficult days of his career, he reflected on the strange turns that life could take. He had joined the Royal Guard with dreams of serving his country and protecting the crown, never imagining he would one day be called upon to help arrest someone who had shared those same ideals. The irony was not lost on him that the very loyalty and dedication that defined their service could somehow be twisted into its opposite. The morning briefing had been unusually tense, with senior officers providing minimal details about the operation while emphasizing the need for absolute discretion and professionalism. Thomas could see the strain on his commanders' faces as they struggled to balance their duty to the crown with their personal relationships with Morrison. Everyone knew this arrest would mark the end of an era, regardless of Morrison's ultimate guilt or innocence. King Charles himself had insisted on being present during the arrest, a decision that had caused considerable concern among his security detail. Having the monarch witness the detention of his former bodyguard posed additional risks and complications, but the king had been adamant. He felt a personal responsibility to face Morrison directly, to look him in the eye as the charges were read, and to ensure that the man who had protected him for so many years was treated with the respect due to his rank and service record, even under these circumstances. The clock on the palace wall showed 10 minutes before Morrison's scheduled arrival for his shift. Thomas checked his equipment one final time and reviewed the arrest procedures in his mind. He had participated in countless security operations over the years, but none had carried the emotional weight of what was about to unfold. The future of royal security, the trust between the crown and its protectors, and the very nature of loyalty itself seemed to hang in the balance as the moment of truth approached. Captain James Morrison walked through the palace gates with the same confident stride he had maintained for over 15 years of faithful service. His uniform was pressed to perfection, his bearing military precise, and his expression carried the alert readiness that had made him one of the most trusted members of the royal security detail. He had no idea that this morning would be his last as a free man, or that the king he had sworn to protect was about to order his arrest. The previous night had been restless for Morrison, though not for the reasons one might expect from a man about to face charges of treason. He had been troubled by a series of strange incidents over the past several weeks that had begun to form a disturbing pattern in his mind. Equipment had gone missing from secure storage areas, security protocols had been mysteriously altered without proper authorization, and he had noticed unfamiliar faces among the palace staff who seemed to have access to areas typically restricted to long-term, thoroughly vetted personnel. Morrison's military training had taught him to trust his instincts, and those instincts were screaming that something was fundamentally wrong within the very institution he had dedicated his life to protecting. What made the situation even more troubling was that his attempts to report these concerns had been dismissed by his superiors, who seemed more interested in reassuring him that everything was under control than in investigating the irregularities he had observed. As he entered the palace for what he believed would be another routine shift, Morrison was mentally reviewing a list of security vulnerabilities he had compiled over the past month. His investigation had led him to suspect that someone within the inner circle of palace operations was systematically compromising the royal family's safety. The evidence he had gathered pointed to a conspiracy that went far deeper than simple negligence or isolated incidents of poor judgment. King Charles waited in the blue drawing room, surrounded by his senior security advisors and legal counsel. The weight of the moment pressed heavily upon him as he rehearsed the words he would use to confront the man who had stood by his side through some of the most challenging moments of his reign. The king's hands trembled slightly as he held the folder containing the evidence against Morrison, evidence that now seemed less certain than it had appeared just hours earlier. Dr. Margaret Thornfield, the palace's chief security analyst, had spent the entire night reviewing the case files with fresh eyes, prompted by nagging doubts that had kept her awake. Her re-examination of the digital evidence had revealed subtle inconsistencies that raised troubling questions about the authenticity of the communications attributed to Morrison. The metadata analysis showed signs of sophisticated manipulation, suggesting that someone with advanced technical skills had carefully constructed a false narrative designed to frame the loyal guard. The financial records that had seemed so damning upon initial review were also beginning to unravel under closer scrutiny. The suspicious bank deposits were traced to legitimate insurance payouts from a vehicle accident Morrison had experienced months earlier, claims that had been processed through a complex network of subsidiary companies that had initially obscured their true origin. The timing of these deposits had been manipulated in the presentation to make them appear suspicious when they were actually perfectly legitimate. Even more disturbing was the discovery that the security footage allegedly showing Morrison in unauthorized locations had been digitally altered using advanced deepfake technology. The technical analysis revealed pixel-level inconsistencies and temporal anomalies that proved the videos had been artificially constructed to create false evidence of wrongdoing. Someone had gone to extraordinary lengths to frame Morrison, using cutting-edge technology that suggested involvement from highly skilled and well-funded adversaries. Thomas positioned himself near the entrance to the blue drawing room, his role in the arrest operation now feeling increasingly uncomfortable as whispers of doubt began circulating among the security team. The senior officers were engaged in hushed conversations, their expressions growing more concerned as new information continued to emerge. The certainty that had driven the decision to arrest Morrison was rapidly evaporating, replaced by the terrifying realization that they might be about to destroy an innocent man's life and career. Morrison's arrival at the scheduled meeting was punctual, as always. He entered the room with professional composure, immediately sensing the unusual tension in the atmosphere, but maintaining his disciplined demeanor. His eyes quickly surveyed the assembled group. Noting the presence of individuals who would normally not be involved in routine security briefings. Years of training and experience had taught him to read situations quickly, and every instinct told him that this meeting was anything but routine. King Charles rose from his chair, his face pale with the strain of what he was about to do. The words he had rehearsed seemed to stick in his throat as he looked at Morrison, a man who had literally saved his life on multiple occasions and had never shown anything but absolute loyalty to the crown. The folder of evidence felt heavy in his hands, its contents now seeming far less certain than they had appeared just hours earlier. "Captain Morrison," the king began, his voice betraying the emotional turmoil he was experiencing, "it is with great difficulty that I must inform you that serious allegations have been made against you regarding your loyalty to the crown and the security of this institution." The formal language felt inadequate to express the personal anguish Charles was feeling as he spoke these words to a man he had come to trust implicitly. Morrison's reaction was immediate and telling. Rather than the anger, denial, or panic that guilty individuals typically displayed when confronted with evidence of wrongdoing, his expression showed genuine confusion mixed with professional concern. His first question was not about his own fate, but about the security implications for the royal family. "Your Majesty, what is the nature of the threat? Are you and your family safe?" This response, so characteristic of Morrison's selfless dedication, sent a chill through everyone present. The presentation of the evidence proceeded according to protocol, But with each piece of supposed proof, Morrison's responses became more illuminating. He provided detailed explanations for every suspicious activity, complete with documentation that had apparently been overlooked during the initial investigation. His account of his whereabouts during the times in question was supported by digital records and witness statements that painted a picture of a man who had been conducting his own investigation into security breaches rather than causing them. Most significantly, Morrison revealed that he had been secretly documenting suspicious activities within the palace for weeks, collecting evidence of what he believed to be a sophisticated infiltration operation designed to compromise royal security. His personal files, which investigators had previously dismissed as irrelevant, contained detailed records of security violations, unauthorized access attempts, and personnel irregularities that painted a picture of systematic sabotage from within. The room fell silent as the implications became clear. Not only was Morrison likely innocent of the charges against him, but his arrest had been orchestrated by the very forces he had been trying to expose. The real conspirators had successfully turned the palace's own security apparatus against one of its most loyal protectors, using sophisticated deception techniques to create false evidence while diverting attention from their actual activities. Thomas watched as the king's expression changed from grim determination to horror as the truth began to emerge. The realization that they had been manipulated into betraying one of their most faithful servants was devastating. But even more terrifying was the understanding that the real threat to the monarchy remained unidentified and apparently still operating from within the palace walls. The arrest operation had not only failed to capture the actual conspirators, but had potentially given them exactly what they wanted: the removal of their most effective opponent. The silence in the blue drawing room stretched painfully as King Charles processed the devastating realization that he had been on the verge of destroying an innocent man's life. Captain Morrison stood at attention, his military bearing intact despite the emotional chaos surrounding him. The evidence folders scattered across the mahogany table now seemed like elaborate fiction rather than proof of treachery, and the weight of near-catastrophic injustice pressed heavily upon everyone present. Dr. Thornfield stepped forward with trembling hands, carrying a tablet displaying the results of her overnight analysis. Her voice was barely steady as she explained how the digital forensics had revealed the sophisticated nature of the deception that had been perpetrated against both Morrison and the Crown. The deepfake technology used to create the false security footage was military-grade, suggesting involvement from highly trained operatives with access to cutting-edge resources that went far beyond what typical criminals could obtain. Morrison's own investigation files were spread across the table like pieces of a complex puzzle that was finally beginning to form a coherent picture. His meticulous documentation revealed a pattern of security breaches that had been occurring for months, each one carefully designed to appear like routine administrative errors or minor oversights. The real conspirators had been extraordinarily patient and methodical, gradually compromising the palace's defensive systems while simultaneously building a false case against the one person most likely to detect their activities. King Charles found his voice, though it carried a tremor that betrayed his emotional state. "Captain Morrison, it appears we owe you not an arrest, but an apology and our deepest gratitude. You have been protecting us from a threat we didn't even know existed, while we were being manipulated into viewing you as the enemy." The king's words carried the weight of genuine remorse, but also a growing determination to uncover the full extent of the conspiracy that had nearly succeeded in removing their most effective defender. The investigation that followed was swift but thorough, guided by Morrison's detailed intelligence and supported by the advanced forensic capabilities that had initially been used to build the false case against him. Within hours, a picture emerged of a sophisticated operation that had been years in the making. The conspirators had infiltrated multiple levels of palace operations, from administrative staff to technical personnel, creating a network that could manipulate information flows and security protocols with frightening effectiveness. The breakthrough came when Morrison's surveillance data revealed unauthorized access to the palace's central security system during overnight hours when only the most trusted personnel were supposed to be on duty. Cross-referencing these intrusions with staff schedules and security logs led to the identification of 3 individuals who had been systematically exploiting their positions to gather intelligence and gradually compromise the royal family's protection protocols. Thomas watched in amazement as the real conspiracy unfolded before his eyes. The sophistication of the operation was staggering. The conspirators had not only planned to neutralize Morrison, but had also positioned themselves to exploit the chaos and vulnerability that would have followed his arrest. Their ultimate goal appeared to be the complete compromise of royal security systems, creating opportunities for attacks or infiltration that could have had devastating consequences for the monarchy and the nation. The arrest of the actual conspirators was conducted with military precision, coordinated across multiple locations to prevent any possibility of escape or destruction of evidence. Unlike the near tragedy that had almost befallen Morrison, these arrests were supported by overwhelming evidence of actual wrongdoing. The suspects' personal communications revealed detailed plans for exploiting the security vulnerabilities they had created, along with connections to hostile foreign intelligence services that elevated the conspiracy from domestic terrorism to international espionage. King Charles personally oversaw the interrogation process, determined to understand not only what had been planned, but how such a sophisticated operation had managed to penetrate the palace's defenses so thoroughly. The revelations were sobering. The conspirators had been gathering intelligence about the royal family's personal habits, travel schedules, and security procedures for years, building a comprehensive understanding of palace operations that would have made them capable of virtually any attack they chose to mount. Morrison's vindication was complete, but the experience had fundamentally changed everyone involved. The king's trust in his security apparatus had been shaken to its core, though his faith in Morrison himself had been strengthened beyond measure. The loyal guard had not only proven his innocence, but had demonstrated a level of dedication and competence that went far beyond the call of duty, even when facing false accusations and potential disgrace. The 5 words that ultimately saved Morrison and exposed the real conspiracy came during the final confrontation with the lead conspirator. When cornered with irrefutable evidence of his guilt, the man's desperation led him to make a crucial mistake. Looking directly at King Charles, he snarled. Morrison was getting too close, confirming not only his own involvement, but also validating Morrison's suspicions and investigative work that had been dismissed by his superiors. Those 5 words transformed everything. They proved that Morrison had been targeted specifically because his investigation was on the right track. They confirmed that the conspiracy was real and had been operating at the highest levels of palace security. Most importantly, they vindicated Morrison's concerns that had been ignored and his methods that had been questioned by those who should have been supporting his efforts to protect the crown. The aftermath of the revelation brought sweeping changes to royal security protocols. Morrison was not only cleared of all charges but was promoted to head of a new counterintelligence division tasked with preventing similar infiltrations in the future. His investigative methods became the template for ongoing security assessments, and his experience surviving a sophisticated frame-up provided valuable insights into the tactics that hostile forces might use against loyal personnel. King Charles publicly acknowledged Morrison's service and sacrifice, though the full details of the conspiracy were kept classified to protect national security and prevent the disclosure of specific vulnerabilities that had been exploited. The The king's personal statement praised Morrison's unwavering loyalty in the face of unprecedented challenges and recognized his essential role in protecting the crown from threats that existed in the shadows of our most trusted institutions. The bond between the king and his vindicated protector was stronger than ever, forged in the crucible of false accusation and ultimate vindication. Morrison returned to his duties with renewed purpose, knowing that his vigilance had been validated and his methods proven effective against even the most sophisticated adversaries. The conspiracy's failure had not only protected the royal family, but had also strengthened the palace's defenses against future threats. Thomas reflected on the extraordinary events he had witnessed, recognizing that he had been present during a moment that would be remembered as a turning point in royal security history. The near arrest of an innocent man had been transformed into the exposure and defeat of a genuine conspiracy, demonstrating both the vulnerability and the resilience of the institutions that protected the monarchy. The 5 words that exposed the truth had ultimately saved not just Morrison's career, but potentially the crown itself from unprecedented danger.